Good afternoon, everyone. We're Team Abu Dhabi. We're very excited to be here. Thank you very much for having us. We're actually from the Masdar office, so you may have heard of it. It's a zero-emission city, a smart city, actually. So what we're going to talk about today is a question on Ericsson's lifts and also the industry's lifts. How do they navigate in the sea of connectivity? We know that in the next 10 years, there's a couple of things that are going to happen which are going to be game-changing for the industry. We know we're moving from voice and data to all IP networks. We know that there's going to be huge stress on the mobile broadband networks. We know that there's going to be an explosion of devices from 5 to 50 billion. And we know that there's going to be a shift in the product and service portfolio. So what are the questions that we want to answer today? The first is around the fee structure. What is going to be the winning business models in the vision for the future? The second is around the role of mobile applications. Applications play a powerful role in untapping the value in the connectivity. The third one is around the future services ecosystem. With this explosion of devices, you've got hundreds of new customer service providers who are entering the ecosystem, and the question is, what kind of services and solutions will they require? So, as a summary of our vision for Ericsson, which is to be an enabler and an advisor in the all-communicating world, we have 3 recommendations today. The first is to capture the share of revenue that is going to come from the explosion of devices. And we're going to give you a couple of tangible examples around that. The second is to grow the services business. This is going to become very important in the next 10 years through an extended offering. We've got a couple of sensible solutions around vertical extensions and horizontal extensions of Ericsson's current services offering. And the third recommendation is around applications, unlocking the value in connectivity via applications. And we're going to demonstrate that our recommendation is that Ericsson makes sure that there's an open platform which is vendor and device agnostic so that those applications can unlock the value. Those 3 recommendations deliver, via our analysis, an estimated 5.4 billion in value for Ericsson. So let's look at the backdrop, the 2020 vision. Let's take a typical user in this scenario, in a world where we are all connected, which is measured, automated, and optimized. Let's take a user. She's called Sarah. She lives in Paris, let's say. She wakes up in the morning. Her lights go on as her alarm goes off. The PV cells on her roof, which is one of dozens in her neighborhood, switches from delivering energy to the grid to powering the devices in her home. She walks to the kitchen, and there's a reminder in her fridge to take her blood sugar levels. She has diabetes. She sends that data back to an online medical device record system. Now, we're all leaving the house. Her mobile tells the smart meter in her house that the house is now not occupied, and it powers down all of the devices. Her husband takes a car to work. On his way, his fuel tank is low, so his GPS gives him targeted advertising where he might get fuel discounts on his journey to work. Sarah, on the other hand, takes the bus. She checks her app to see that the bus is about 7 minutes away. Her day is filled with the routine video conference calls. She actually has a delivery coming, and the courier company, using fleet management software and systems, can tell that she's actually just relocated down to their downtown office for that short time and reroutes the service so she can get that delivery. She has a quick video conference chat with her son on the way home. She arrives at her building, which uses remote security monitoring. She checks her Facebook channel, which gives her some live video streaming. For example, her sister's in Australia and streaming her event at the Melbourne Cup Day that day. And finally, she goes to bed with her iPad, reading a multimedia book, which has a specially designed soundtrack to go with it. So that's the vision of 2020, but how are we going to be paying for all of that? Today, there is established consumer behaviour around all you can eat for data, and this cycle is going to be very hard to break. We know that customers want to pay the same or probably less over time for the data that they consume. So one possible solution to that is moving to bucketed pricing. So this means charging for data thresholds rather than monthly access. And although this won't increase revenues, what it will do is stop the deterioration in revenue per bit that we're seeing today. But where we think the real value add is in this explosion of devices. These devices are going to provide a whole new host of services. And let's take the example of the smart meter for Sarah. She accessed the smart meter, which which recalled data from the utility company, which has all the information about the appliances and the consumption of energy in her home. The utility company provides the information back to her using the telco's infrastructure. The telco, in return, charges for that access. But does the user need to see that revenue model? The user pays $40 a month for their gas. Embedded in that, which they don't need to know about, is the small percent that goes to the telco for the use of that infrastructure by providing that service. So we call that an indirect or invisible pricing model, and we think that is the game-changing piece of the revenue model for the future by providing new customers in this ecosystem. Now, the final thing is about the services that might be required. Traditionally, we're providing outsourced managed services and IT consulting to just the telco industry. But with the explosion of devices, there's going to be a whole new host of customer service operators who are going to need consulting, managed services, and solutions around their communication and their communication offering. So a couple of examples of categories of these new providers would be remote healthcare providers, smart energy providers, connected transport providers. And when you add all of those categories needing solutions around their ICT offering, we have around a $13 billion opportunity.
Okay, so Rachel's given us a view of what the world will look like for the consumer in 5 years or 10 years' time, and also what the billing models are, what the fee structures in that world will be. But let's step back for a second. This is what we see as the current communications industry value chain. We have 6 fairly distinct segments: content providers, infrastructure providers, service solution providers, operators, device manufacturers, and application developers. Although some major companies play across more than one of these segments, they are fairly well separated at the minute. That's going to change. We see in the future the lines between these different segments will blur, and they'll blur as major companies in this area look to expand vertically across the value chain and secure more margin for themselves. We're already seeing application developers such as Google moving into device manufacturer. We're seeing companies that are traditionally infrastructure providers, that's Huawei, moving into service solutions. The other major change in the competitive market structure in the communications industry is we're going to see new entrants. British Gas, you wouldn't have traditionally thought of as a player in the communications industry. But in 2015, when they own the smart monitoring device in your house, and when they own the customer relationship and the data associated with that device, they're a content provider in the communications industry providing data. So, Rachel touched upon our 3 major recommendations for how Ericsson creates and secures value in this changing world. The first one is to secure a share of revenue created by exploding growth in connected services. So what does that mean? The number of connected devices in the world is going to grow from 5 billion today to 50 billion in the next 10 years. That's amazing growth. Even more amazing, Morgan Stanley estimates that from now until 2014, we're going to see a 100% per annum increase in bandwidth requirements in developed markets. That's quite large, and that changes things for Ericsson, creating 2 major opportunities. The first one is to support that growth by providing the infrastructure required for these increased capacity requirements. That's the core business. We're doing that today. I'll touch on that in a second. The second major one is to provide the technology required for the new connected devices. So your smart monitors, your in healthcare, transportation, utilities, the things Rachel touched upon. We see an opportunity here for Ericsson with the brand Connected by Ericsson. Everyone in this room would be aware of the Intel Inside logo, the Intel Inside strategy. A majority of home PCs today are stamped with that Intel Inside stamp, which establishes Intel as a well-known technology leader in that industry. People go into stores and they want Intel. We can create the same thing here for connected smart devices. I'm thinking about home appliances, I'm thinking about cars, I'm thinking about monitors on your gas meter. They're all stamped with connected by Ericsson. So as I said, the first priority is the core business. The first priority is to maintain the #1 position in mobile network infrastructure during the LTE or 4G rollout. There's 12 major telecommunications companies here. You would have heard of them all. Every single one of these 12 plans on beginning the build out of its LTE network by the end of this year. This is happening now, and this is core business, as everyone's aware. The second thing I touched upon is to profit from the rollout of new connected devices. So one example is a potential partnership with Vodafone in the UK and British Gas. Today, British Gas, which is the leading gas provider in the United Kingdom, sends an overpaid, unionised British employee to every single house connected to British Gas twice a year. That's expensive. By removing the need to send that overpaid employee, you create a net present value of £272 just by installing the monitoring device. And we can see here that that significantly outweighs the cost of installing the device. It's about £70 to buy, it's about £130 to install. We're creating £72 of additional new value per household. Now, the reason we're talking about Great Britain is because the UK government in December 2009 mandated that by 2020 every single household will have a smart monitoring device. This market exists now, it's ripe to be exploited. British Gas has about 30% share of the market. So we're suggesting Ericsson can gain about 10% market share. This could be a $500 million per annum revenue opportunity in Western Europe alone. So it's a big opportunity, but how do we get there? Entry strategy is key. We need to move quickly. It's already happening. In fact, Ericsson has already done a trial, already has about 1 million houses with smart monitoring devices in Italy. There's a company called Echelon which has about 27 million devices right now. Through strategic partnerships and strategic JVs and acquisitions, we can quickly establish a position in these markets. So Echelon could be a potential acquisition target. A company like Bosch, this is for smart appliances now, not smart monitoring, could be a potential partner. I see these partnerships as analogous to the existing Sony Ericsson partnership. So we're talking about partnering with a company with an established presence in a market and deep consumer knowledge in that market, Ericsson providing the technology and the connectivity expertise to win in the new developments of that market. Risk mitigation is important. There's a reason why we're suggesting that Ericsson become a device supplier, not a device buyer. So we're selling smart monitors to British Gas. We're also selecting partners who already have expertise. That de-risks the market entry strategy. I'll pass over to Goban, who's going to talk about our second recommendation.
Thank you, Nick. Our analysis shows that the biggest growth for Ericsson is going to come through its services businesses. Today, 40% of the revenue for British Gas comes in services by providing support solutions and outsource management to the telcos, the network operators that we have today. Now think about this for a moment, of the position that Ericsson has in the telecommunications space. A, it has very strong relationships with the network operators. And B, if we implement strategy 1, which recommendation 1, we also have very strong relationships with the utility providers and all the other people in a different industry. Now, given this position, that's 1. And B, it has proven technical expertise in the telecommunication space. Now that places Ericsson in a very strong position to move into consulting the current telcos to advise them on management consulting. And it also allows Ericsson to move into new markets, which basically where the client will be energy providers and transport and healthcare providers, providing whatever they do currently, which is support solutions and outsource management. Now let's look at how big that piece here is, which, so our, currently it's about $7.5 billion market in the telecom space, 2010. In 2015, we believe that the potential is about 16 billion. Now that we think is a huge upside. On the telco side, where we advise moving into management consulting, Rachel talked about the fee structure of how the fee structure that will be there in the new world. And the telcos not having relationships with the utility companies will look out for a technology leader like Ericsson for management advice in areas such as optimal pricing models or new revenue streams. And Ericsson is probably well positioned to enable these partnerships between the telcos and the utility companies. So I'm going to hand over to Puya, who's going to talk about the third recommendation.
Thank you. So the third recommendation that we have is about mobile applications. Why are we going to talk about those? Because we think those hold the key into basically tapping into these new business models. Why? Let's start by looking at the market size. We would like to highlight some facts. Number one is that mobile applications have shown to bring value to users. And you can see that from the number of downloads that iPhone apps have had, 3 million downloads in about 16 months after launch. That's huge. Number two, which is quite important, is that 75% of these apps are paid apps. So the users have shown a willingness to pay for that value that have been brought. The third one is that so far, applications have been primarily targeted at iPhones. But there's going to be over 400 million smartphones in the market by 2014, and this provides a huge opportunity. 17 billion by 2012 is estimated by Morgan Stanley. Let's look at these new business models that we talk about. So what does the business model look like today? iPhone apps, 70% of the price of the iPhone, once off, goes to developer, 30% goes to the Apple App Store. We don't think that's sustainable. You can do that when you're Apple and you can have exclusive access to everything. When the market becomes open, we think the sales commission is going to go to a reasonable 10% or so, providing an opportunity for what we call application enabler to take their part, a chunk of the money. We think people like telcos and people like that provide the data for these to enable these these new applications to work can get a part of that money. And also, there's new pricing models being developed. It's not going to have to be a one-off. It could be a subscription-based or pay-per-use. So let's look at what we think Ericsson should do. Number one, we think development of an open platform for app innovation is extremely important. You can imagine that we were very happy to hear about eStore being announced by Hans earlier this year, basically, in the Mobile World Congress. What this would do is that it would ensure in a fragmented market there is a platform agnostic and there is a operator agnostic solution available, and that would stimulate growth. One thing that we would like to highlight is that it would be a great addition to the eStore if you could add two services that currently App Store doesn't offer. One is cloud services, and the second is mobile payment. Especially mobile payment, we think that's essential for untapping some of these new business models. We would like to actually look at this smart company startup that we investigated. They are a startup working on mobile payment industry. They just got their round C funding of about $25 million, and they're doing some interesting things. They're available. They are currently operating in 80 countries, so this is something interesting to look at. The second thing we think Ericsson should do is that it should enable new mobile applications for all these connected by Ericsson devices. We think all this connectivity provides a huge opportunity for new applications that none of us has ever thought of before. To enable those, we think Ericsson should provide open access to the devices and perhaps try to come up with a universal standard through bodies like GSMA or as such. That would allow developer access. These developers, if you think about wonderful applications that people have come up with, are not going to be corporate citizens. They're going to be small people working from their parents' garage, basically. So you really need to allow open access. Let's recap. We tell you three recommendations. One around basically getting a share of this expanded growth, exploding market. The second was extending your offering into service. And the third was around the App Store. $5.4 billion. And by the way, that represents about a 20% uplift on the share price. That should make everybody happy. We have a little bit of implementation plan here as well, basically around establishing partnerships, establishing the solutions and rolling them out. And this is based on a trial that you just did in Italy, basically, on rolling out these new services. Thank you very much for listening, and love to take your questions now.
So first of all, thank you for a great presentation. And then let's see, who wants to go first? Rob?
First of all, I like the way you laid out the sort of the predicate and premise here. But at one point, I wasn't sure whether Ericsson's selling directly to the user or if it's through the telco. When you're looking at the utility and other situation, you were laying out, but there was a point, I think, which you made.
So the way we see it working is Ericsson, we're talking about who Ericsson's selling to, not who the consumer
Let me put it a slightly different way, in a proposition way. Do you see Ericsson as essentially acting as a wholesaler to, say, the operator community, or do you see it that Ericsson really needs to break out of that mold and somehow distance it, not distance itself, but find other more direct avenues to the user? That's a fundamental question. And I kind of picked up two different streams coming here.
Can I take that? I think when we talk about solutions for industries, we're looking at B2B. We're looking at providing value for the transport system, providing value for healthcare, providing value for the utility. You would be selling to them directly, and they would be charging the consumer in the term.
Who would be selling directly to them?
So we're selling directly to the utility company, a smart meter
But
solution.
who Ericsson would be selling directly?
Ericsson. Yes, sorry to say we already feel like part of the team.
I think they appreciate that.
So Ericsson makes money here in a couple of ways. There's the device sale, absolutely, but then there's also, out of that, so we spoke of value created for the utility company through cost saving. They don't have to pay the overpriced British employee anymore. Now that value created is divided, of course they'll keep some for themselves, of course they'll pay a little bit to the telco for that connectivity, which in itself helps Ericsson in a second order sort of way. They might provide a saving to the user, but there's a fourth area where they need advice, which is what Goban touched upon, on how to implement this solution. So they're going to need a solution. So they might be paying Ericsson for services and for the providing that solution as well as providing the
Okay, so you've got revenue share, and you're going to share something with the telco in this case. Yeah. Do you see any tension at all with the telco in terms of reaching out to that user?
Reaching out to the user being the utility.
So what I hear you're saying is you're really asking Ericsson move in a sort of parallel way to from a wholesale market where they do, think of today, they basically support the operator.
Yeah.
In this particular case, they're saying, look, we operator are going to give you a piece of the action, but we'll actually go to the user ourselves.
Well, I actually see this as similar to what Sony Ericsson does now, in that we're providing devices to the utility company, and they'll use those devices to connect through the telco, and they'll actually enable this incremental revenue, which the telcos aren't getting now, which comes from these devices.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Particularly appreciate you mentioning the _1 position in mobile systems. And my question to you is in relation to pricing models and fee structures. And does Ericsson play a role in the development and implementation of these new pricing models, in your opinion? And what would that role be? How would Ericsson realize that?
We think basically you have this relationship with the telcos. They look to you for solutions, basically. And they're facing a very tough market. We do think that that Ericsson plays a role. We think you're seen as an advisor. We think more and more you have to be seen as a business model advisor as well. Why? Because we think you hold the key to this new value creation. So when you start building up these solutions and bringing value to these basic consumers of the telco, they would expect you to use this relationship to also give them advice on the business models that they have, because you really understand the market quite well. So we really think that there is an opportunity here to also provide management consulting services to the telcos.
So if I may just add to that, so today if you think about, telcos have no relationship between with the utility companies. Now Ericsson, in our recommendation 1, we said Ericsson is going to provide these devices to the utility companies, such as smart meter to British Gas, which enables us, which basically what happens is we build relationships with the utility companies, and we already have relationships with the telcos. So it puts us in a right position to advise telcos on the business models and how they should go about partnering with British Gas.
Okay, thank you. Relationships are strong. I understand the point about advice, but what else would complete the value proposition for Ericsson? What does Ericsson need to do to acquire those mechanisms to influence operators towards these new pricing models for a win-win?
Right. Yeah. So if you look at the price, the way telcos charges a user today is flat fee. Now the issue with that is that with data usage, the telcos are not getting the right share of the pie, because the usage is high, but the telcos are not being able to charge higher because the user has an established mindset of a flat fee. The user is not willing to pay. And therefore we came to the bucketed pricing model, which Ericsson can help foster to the telcos.
How?
I'll tell you just in one second. So that is, so that's one part. The other, if you think about what happens because of this relationship with the utility companies, is that telcos get an additional revenue stream, which these utility companies have to, because of the usage that they do of the communication system.
This is the upside we see. And telcos are going to be excited by this because it gives them a mechanism to gain indirect revenue from the user and therefore increase the total revenue that they get per user without increasing this bill. So this is the upside, and we enable this upside, or Ericsson enables this upside by providing the solutions and the devices to these guys. So Ericsson is very key.
Go back to the how thing. A little bit is that we are here suggesting that right now perhaps you don't have the management consulting capability. We are suggesting that you should develop it, because we are suggesting that you could have an Accenture model. You're giving the service, but you're also providing a management consulting capability. And they are quite desperate, let's put it that way, these days, telcos. So using that relationship and building that capability, you would be able to offer a service which you're well positioned to do.
Thank you.
Sanjay?
Yeah. I thought it was very well articulated. I mean, you really painted a picture that we kind of vision as well. And I thought you then went into defining the strategy pretty well. What I miss is a little bit on the execution side. I mean, of course, it's great that you're proposing we should move into the vertical space, call it health or utilities. Did you, in your analysis, assume what capabilities we need to approach them? I mean, today, we do not do much with those industries. We do everything through telcos. So did you think about that? How do we execute on that strategy?
Last slide.
You cover that, not cover implementation.
Yeah, so a couple of points. That is why we're suggesting partnerships. So as I said, it's analogous to Sony Ericsson. We want to partner with someone who knows the customer so home appliances is one example. Mm-hmm. That might be Bosch, that might be General Electric. That's someone who knows that customer and has an established position in that market. They're just not smart connected appliances, but they're appliances. So they want Ericsson's technology and connectivity expertise. We want their customer relationship and customer knowledge. There's a nice synergy there. In terms of implementation, do you want to?
Yeah, so do you want to just go to the last slide?
Yeah.
So the three categories, what you needed to do for just in the utilities example, and we kind of took the lead from the pilot that you're doing in Italy, was the first one is around partnerships. So Nick just talked about the types of partnerships you'd need to get into utilities. And the first one for metering is a metering provider. Echelon is a good example of that. They have the technology. The second one is partnerships in acquiring the customer base, the British Gas. So you need to start those discussions. Now, the second part of the implementation is around solution design. And you've got a pilot case of that, and I think that you have the expertise to design the end-to-end solution. In the solution is going to be things like the billing systems, the customer interface, the call centres, the field service operations, and the actual connectivity of the technology itself, the transmission, the types of the pieces that are used in that technology space. And the final piece there is truly just the technology that's needed to do the end-to-end solution. And we think that through your existing expertise, plus with these new partnerships, that you would have the capability of doing such a solution. Answer the question?
Thank you.
Okay, so what would you say would be the major risks if this would fail? I mean, if it would fail, what would it fail upon, and what would you do to mitigate that if you take your overall plan?
It varies by recommendation. I think the major risk in the App Store recommendation, which is the third one, is can Ericsson establish an App Store in that space? Is it going to be competitive? Are there going to be 100 other people trying to do the same thing? I actually don't see that as too bad a risk. It's a very small percentage of our overall uplift is from App Stores, and actually the main reason for this recommendation, one of the main reasons, is to enable more people to use apps on broadband internet and therefore feed the core. The more people who are using broadband internet in a more sophisticated manner, the quicker bandwidth requirements grow. That's good for Ericsson's core business of infrastructure provisioning. Risk in creating, in securing a share of new connected devices. The big risk is getting those partners, getting those relationships. Why does British Gas want to go with Ericsson? Why does a healthcare provider want to go with Ericsson? Without those people with the customer relationships, it's a very hard market to enter. So that's why we're suggesting move now, move quickly, establish those partnerships early and establish them in a way that articulate exactly how much, what's happening.
Found the right slide.
It's connected.
And establish those partnerships early and get first mover advantage to avoid that risk. As we said, we want to be a supplier, not a buyer. We don't want to be the owner of the devices, of the smart monitoring devices in people's houses. We want to sell those to a partner. Therefore, there's a much lesser capital outlay and it is de-risked to some extent. In terms of risks in the service offering, do you want to?
So if you think of the service offering, there are two parts to that. One is we are saying we will expand horizontally. So basically, we'll provide the same services to new industries, which is the utility providers and the healthcare providers. Now, in that, it's the same solutions that we are providing, so we think we have the capability there. The bigger risk is we are trying to provide management consulting advice to telcos. At this point, Ericsson is not exactly in that business and probably does not have the capabilities. So which is this piece? Basically, so we are saying we are going to provide management consulting advice to network operators. The good thing here is that we know they are already partners for us, so we know the Vodafones really well. So to build that capability, I think some of it will be hiring. So what we need is selling capability of management consulting. That is something that we will be missing. So how do we build selling capability? I mean, McKinsey and BCG, when they have to, so let's say BCG has to expand to telcos, they're not so big in telcos today, they hire a partner from some other company which is stronger. That's one of the ways you can build that selling capability. I mean, it's a very proven model.
Just takes a couple of McKinsey guys.
Another way we're de-risking, if you think about it, we're currently very strong in ICT support. We're currently very strong in outsourced management for telcos. Products we're very strong in, we're now offering those to new entrants to the communications industry. So we're avoiding risk by focusing on our strengths, but offering them to the new entrants that will now need it. Similarly, telcos, we're very strong in telcos. We're moving up the value chain and offering higher level advice. There's a reason why there's nothing in this top right-hand corner. We don't want to do two steps at once. And we want to focus on capabilities which either Ericsson already has or they're very close to what Ericsson already has.
Thanks.
By the way, I liked your British Gas example. Those folks are also probably on strike today, so let me hone in on the App Store for a second. You gave an intriguing statement about open in the beginning, okay? Why go open platform versus what Apple's doing? What's the advantage for Ericsson in doing that? And what does Ericsson bring into that proposition that builds to their strength? And what is that strength that they do? And then I want to turn to billing.
So I think there are multiple questions there. The first question was, why should Ericsson build an open platform? The reason is that it is beneficial to all parties involved, and I'll tell you how. So let's think of the developer. Now, the developer today can build an application for the iPhone app, right? For the Apple App Store, but that works only on iPhones. As a developer, I'm a cool guy. I'm a technology guy. I like cool technologies. I want more people to use my app, so I don't want to restrict myself to a particular technology, particular platform, or a particular hardware. As a user, again, I want to be able to use rich applications, whether tomorrow I change Vodafone to another carrier or another network operator, or whether I change my device from BlackBerry to iPhone or any other smartphone that I use. The network operator does not, again, want to tie itself to only iPhone sales, right, or service plans for iPhone or for BlackBerry. There is a benefit for the telco, which is the Vodafone, to go across the board and sell all kinds of devices and service plans. So that is why an open platform we think is key. Now, we also recommended to actually go into enable this open platform with capabilities such as cloud services and mobile platforms, mobile payments. And the reason is that that will enable building rich applications. And I want to draw a parallel from what Amazon Web Services does today. Amazon Web Services has come up with a cloud computing platform which offers payment services, storage services, hosted web services, which is currently enabling hundreds of new innovative applications that developers are building every day. So there's an exponential growth that we are seeing there. The iPhone, the App Store, the Apple App Store lacks some of those capabilities today. So as an iPhone developer, if I want to develop an application, I will need to integrate with another payments provider, such as maybe PayPal. PayPal doesn't offer mobile platform, but some other smaller, maybe like Boku or somebody, to enable rich applications. So I think there is value in creating an open platform with the enhanced platform capabilities.
Can I take the second part of that question? So
let me give it up, and because it'll then maybe come together a little way. So now you have this open platform. Is there any value to offering that as a white label to the operator community and saying, here, use this? And by the way, is there any value to saying to the operators, you've got a billing engine, let me facilitate the billing of this through my white label platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, we actually assume that you're doing that, because that's exactly the purpose of this, right?
Who's we?
Because you want, sorry, Ericsson. Ericsson is doing that. Because
he's the we part, I'm the other guy.
Yeah, we assume, and that is something that needs to be done. Why? Because Ericsson is, we assume that Ericsson is not in this to make a marketplace amount of money. $350,000 is probably what you spend on, what they spend, Ericsson spends on, what, I don't know, the pens and pencils every year. What this does, it enables the telcos to get a chunk of that money. And telcos are going to want to sell this. Because right now, iPhone App Store gets 30% of the cut. That's huge. No marketplace gets 30% of the cut. You get 5%, 10% commission on sales. Somebody who's enabling that technology would need to get part of that cut, and to do that, telcos are going to need to sell it under their own branding. Exactly, you're exactly right. And that's where the value of this solution that we're offering comes in, I think.
We have room for a question. Okay, I mean, this first one where you suggested $500 million upside. So could we go a little bit deeper? How do we get it?
So $500 million is essentially, we've got 400 million population in Western Europe. We're talking about 10% penetration of devices in that market. So 400 million divided by 3, because that's the population, we're talking households. There's about 3 per house, so we got to 133. Then we're saying 10% penetration of devices. So you go from 133, you get 13.3. We're saying £70 per device, so multiply it by 70. We're then saying Ericsson has, it's in the footnotes, Ericsson has 50% market share, and then there's an exchange rate of 1.48. So do all those multiplications and you get to 500 million, I promise.
Good, thank you.
And that's just the device, right?
And that's, what we should point out is that's just the device sales. So remember, we had a saving of no longer having the expensive British employee, and then we had a cost of £70 of device sales, £130 of installation. So that actually left a created value of 72. Now what we're talking about right now is Ericsson getting a share of those device sales. Now if Ericsson actually captures some of that 72 through advice to the utility companies, through these new service models, then the number could be bigger. Also, we're talking about utilities. We haven't spoken about healthcare yet. We haven't spoken about transportation yet. We haven't spoken. There's a number of uplifts. That's
okay, great. Thank you very much, Team Abu Dhabi.